Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ways to Human. Today, I am doing an episode with Dr. Darrel Ray, and we are going to be talking about this new amazing program that he is starting up. So, hey, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, AJ.
Sure, sure. I'm excited to hear about this. I've been hearing a lot about it from some of my fellow leaders in the community. So, I think it's very exciting. Just so people can learn, a little bit more about you. Can you tell us more, like, for example, what degrees do you hold? I know you've written some books, so we could talk about that. Can you share a little bit?
Sure, I'm a psychologist. I've been a psychologist all my adult life, pretty much, and went to Vanderbilt. Got a doctorate in psychology um, but my undergraduate was in anthropology and sociology. Obviously interests that I have. But in between getting a bachelor's degree and a doctor's degree, I got a degree from Scarrett College for Christian Workers. I got a religion degree. I got a
Wow.
little everything because I thought I was going to be a minister for a short moment. But after 2 years of seminary, I realized it was pretty much all BS, and I started moving away from that. But yeah, I spent most of my career of 10 years in clinical psychology, and then I moved into organizational psychology, which I really loved. And I did that for almost 35 years, uh, organizational psychology. And for my organizational psych, which we'll come back to as we talk about the course, I draw a lot upon my work in corporate America and nonprofits, for which I wrote a couple books. One is called Teaming Up, and that was published by McGraw-Hill Publishers. And then the second book came about 5 years later. It's called The Performance Culture, published with IPC Press. So that was my career, and I was really into leadership development, leadership training, team building, or in all things organizational psych related. And then I moved in after when I was getting close to retiring. I loved all the books I was reading, Dawkins books and Hitchens books and Harris books and Dennett's books. I mean, all the books. I read it all, but nobody was writing any books on the subject. It was very near and dear to my heart, and that is how religion infects the brain and how it influences our psychology. So that motivated me to write my book, The God Virus, that then sold extremely well, still sells extremely well today. I'm very surprised at how many copies it's that got me into a lot of other things I hadn't planned on. I mean, for one, as a result of that, I, uh, I had a bit of controversy. A lot of my clients were evangelical Christians. They were in the HR
Mm.
department of major corporations. I mean, I was working with companies like General Electric and Cummins Diesel Engine and Blue Cross Blue Shield. I was also working with a lot of mental health institutes. I was also working with nonprofits like Harvesters. You name it. I've probably worked in that industry over 35 years. You do a lot of different things. Anyway, that got me into a lot of interesting people and things, but it also alienated some of my clients. And so as a result of that, I pretty much lost my business totally. I had to retire about 3 years early. And but fortunately, the God virus sold well enough to make up for a lot of that lost income. And it launched me into a whole new career that we're going to be partially talking about here today. My fourth and I'll just say final book that I published, because I think I finished writing books, was my book Sex and God, and that was sex and human sexuality have always been a major interest of mine, and that was one of the most popular chapters in my book. The God Virus was on sex and religion. So anyway, that's a very short summary of my career up until I started recovering from religion in 2009, and that has consumed my life for the last 17 years. If we're 17 years old next month in April.
Oh, wow.
Very, very
Congratulations. Happy
excited
anniversary, I guess.
about it. We are now over 250 volunteers in around the globe, and cover about 20 time zones. And we have a call line, a chat line, a phone line. We do support groups, 60 or 70 support groups around the planet. We serve tens of thousands of people every year, and that is not an exaggeration. It is tens of thousands. They either call our chat line, they chat in with us, they call us, or they visit one of our groups, or they use our resources. And we're in the business of helping anybody deal with the consequences of leaving any religion. It could be Hinduism, it could be Buddhism, it could be Christianity, Islam. We don't care. We're here to help. We're not here to convert or deconvert. We're just here to help. And
Right.
we do a lot of training and supervision of our volunteers to keep us all close to that mission of helping people.
Yeah, well, the work that RFR does is amazing. I mean, when I first came into the atheist or secular community, like that was like the very first sort of big organization I heard about. Like you come in and you start talking to some people, and they're like, "Oh, have you heard of RFR?" And it's like, "Oh, that's cool." So I checked them out, and I was like really impressed with the reach that you have because, yeah, like you said, it's definitely not just local. It's not even just in the US, it's all over the world that you have people recommending it and making use of the opportunity that they have to get some help to get out of whatever religion they're getting out of. Yeah. So today
Down
we're
our
gonna. Oh yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say our board is international. We've one board members in Australia, another board members in France, and we have volunteers in I, I think 30 different countries or something like that. We
Wow.
really not a North American organization. We're a global organization. Sometimes people think, "Oh, you're just a U.S. organization," and that's not true. We have really worked hard to be international and to support. We do try to support especially in the Spanish speaking world. We've got a number of volunteers that have got Spanish skills.
That's
We
awesome.
volunteers to speak Romanian, Lithuanian, French. So we just try to be what have what we people need when they call us.
Yeah, as inclusive as possible. You've mentioned, obviously, you work for RFR and you work for all of these other organizations. And how long have you been working specifically with boards and leadership? Has that, I know RFR, you say 17 years. Were there any before that or?
Well, I was training corporate executives, team leaders. I was training entire corporations in a system that I developed and invented called teaming up. Um, so yeah, I've been doing that for 35, 40 years. I developed a system, published both my first two books on that system. But that system is focused on corporate kinds of organizations rather than nonprofits. So as I was traveling doing book tours for my third and fourth books, The God Virus, Sex and God, I started hearing a lot of complaints everywhere I went. I was doing book tours in Australia. I did a book tour in England, Ireland. I was speaking everywhere, all over North America and Canada. And everywhere I would go, I would hear complaints from people. Leaders would come to me and say, we haven't grown in the last 10 years, or we keep we keep having leaders leave us, and we can't maintain a good leadership structure, or all we have is conflict between people. People are always fighting in our group, and nobody wants to come to meetings, or I can't get anything done. I have to do it all myself. That's I could list a long list, AJ, of the complaints I was hearing as I was
Yeah,
traveling
yeah, imagine.
all around, and I was also going to conventions and conferences and speaking as I like to do, not just promote my books, but promote the ideas that I think are important for the secular world and the world of psychology. So I had the idea that about 2012, well, why don't I just do a leadership workshop at the conference? While I'm there, I'm speaking on my book, The God Virus or Sex and God. So I'll just do a workshop. And I did that a couple different times. And I quickly realized it's not very productive, not good use of my time to do a simple 1 or 2 hour workshop at a conference where everybody's having partying and having, wanting to hear other speakers and all. It just didn't work very well. I could never get more than 10 or 15 people to show up, and even then, that was hard work. But in I believe it was 2012, a man and a woman came to my leadership workshop at a little conference in Cincinnati, and they were really seemed to be really engaged in what I was saying, which I found interesting. I didn't know who these people were, but afterwards they came up to me, introduced themselves, and we went out and had a drink. And their name was Gail Jordan and Elliot Elliot
Of course, I
Cantor.
know there. Yeah, I love them.
So
Amazing people.
I got to know Elliot and Gail, mainly Elliot to start with, and this went on for 2 or 3 years. He helped me with some problems and issues I was having with some of the organizational stuff. And then we had an opening for the executive director, and Gail applied, and that was 11 years ago, and she's still
Wow.
our director.
She is,
So
yeah, yeah. I think that they're a great team for what the different things that they do for the
yeah,
organization and outside of the organization. So yeah, it's great. I'm glad that they're involved in RFR.
so doing that little workshop at a conference led to much bigger, helped me, do much bigger things. So I guess it wasn't a total failure since I did get some damn friends out of it.
That's true. Yeah, sometimes these workshops or these meetings may seem really small, but then you get a really huge benefit from them. Like
Yeah,
in the case of Gail and Elliot, who
yeah,
came to you at one of those, because otherwise you may not have met them at that time. They may not have
yeah,
ever heard about you or something. So
right, right. I had this notion of this leadership thing back in 2012, 2013, but I was consumed with about the same time I started another organization called the Secular Therapy Project. And
mhm.
that also consumed a lot of my time for several years. So even though I was interested in this problems that I was seeing, I didn't have the time or the energy to start start some kind of leadership development program. Um, and then Recovery from Religion is just working like a clock. It's doing really well. There's Gail runs the organization, the board. I'm president of the board, but the board is really engaged and a working board that's doing great work. So I don't have to put as much time in RFR as I used to. And the Secular Therapy Project is running like a top. And we got a new director recently, and he just came right in, started doing great work. Got a great team. In fact, we're even planning a conference, maybe in Atlanta, Georgia,
Wow.
this time next year. It's going to be a religious trauma conference. But that's still in the planning phases. But we've got a good team. They're putting that together, and so there's a lot going on. But they don't need me like they used to. So a couple of years ago, I said, well, okay, maybe it's time for me to start thinking about this leadership idea again, and uh, and we can talk about that if you want.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I was gonna ask you what. I don't know if you ever had it held any positions in religious organizations, but my question was whether you've seen a difference in the type of leadership that religious organizations have and the type of leadership that secular organizations need or currently have but could improve on.
Wow, that's a really good question, and because it's central to the whole thesis of the Secular Leadership Institute. Yes, I actually remember I got a master's degree in religion, and for the next 10 years after I graduated with my master's degree, I stayed liberal religion. I was still liberal Christian. I wasn't. I became an atheist later. That's what I identify right now as. But I'm because people know I'm a psychologist, because people know I'm an organizational psychologist too. I kept getting phone calls from churches and leaders and ministers, and I actually for about 10 years I off and on, kind of rarely. I didn't do it a lot, but I preached as a substitute preacher. You
Wow.
know, vacation at the church 50 miles down the road, and they'd call me up and say, "Hey, can you preach next Sunday so our minister can be on vacation?" So I actually was a preacher for,
Interesting. I did not know that. That's cool.
for I never held an actual position as a preacher, and I wasn't licensed in the churches I was I preached in Methodist churches, and I preached in Presbyterian churches, but I'm neither one. I consider myself a Quaker, but
The substitute
yeah,
preacher.
but I can speak pretty well, but I do have the singular distinction. I could give an entire sermon and never mention the word Jesus. I could do a whole sermon without talking about God. And so that what that meant, AJ, was that I never got invited to come back and speak at the same church twice. Ever asked me to come back? I was too little for him.
They were like, oh no. Did
But
they just stopped inviting you, huh? Like the other
well,
ones once the
they found
word
some.
spread?
Yeah, they found else, I guess. I don't know what happened. I got my $50. They didn't pay very much. $50 for doing a service, and I had to drive 50 miles. It was just.
Ooh.
uh, But that I did have this opportunity to work with these churches, and I would go in. I would do interventions with churches that were having trouble with their ministers, or churches that, yeah, there was a lot of crazy stuff. There's a lot of crazy stuff goes on in churches, and a big part of crazy stuff, and I mean things like sexual harassment and inappropriate sexual behavior on the part of the minister, which you wouldn't be surprised about. It showed me that these problems can exist because churches are so good at hiding all their problems and ignoring their problems and denying the conflict. So, what I noticed early in my career is that churches are super good at conflict avoidance. And that if you question the minister, you are the problem. You should not be questioning the minister. You should not be, you're causing conflict if you ask embarrassing questions. Like, where'd the money go last week from the offering? Or why is the church choir director seem to spend so much time in the minister's office? You know, those are questions that I was asking, I was involved in. I saw the leadership style, and here's the problem: when people religion, and we have a lot of people leaving, a lot of ministers leaving, and that's why we've got the project called the Clergy Project, why that exists. But what I've noticed is those people have a leadership style that is absolutely inappropriate for the secular world. And so you see a lot of ministers coming out of the ministry becoming atheists, and they don't know how to lead secular people. I also hear a lot of people saying something that just irritates me no end, and that is leading atheists is like herding cats. I hear that a lot. Have you
Uh,
heard people?
I've heard the term. Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
not
that
too many
that
times, but I've heard it.
well, it irritates me when I hear it because we're not hurting cats, we're hurting humans. We are leading humans. And if you say something like it's like leading hurting cats, this is more about you than it does about your followers. And we're here to help people learn and contribute to their communities as secularists, not as religionists. And their leadership styles are very different. And that's one of the key things we learn in the course that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot. There's several ex-pastors or ex-ministers in the community, and you can tell the type of leadership or the type of when they talk to people, it seems more like preaching rather than trying to engage or understand the people they're talking to. So yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for people like that to learn how to change their style, and how to leave that part of the religion behind. Because
Yeah,
you know the process of deconversion isn't something that you wake up to the next day and like everything's gone. It's a process, and it can
yeah,
take people years to overcome certain hurdles or certain things that are so deeply embedded into someone's personality, into the core of who they are, that they
Mm.
have a harder time deconverting that part of themselves. So your program is called Institute for Secular Leadership, and I think
Right.
people can find that Institute for Secular, or is it called the website? What is it called?
Secular
Is that the
leadership.
full? Okay, secularleadership.org. Okay,
Right.
perfect.
Right.
In the time that you've been involved in all of these organizations, have you seen any of them like fail, like really badly, have to completely shut down or completely restructure their leadership, their organization because of poor leadership, especially in the secular community?
We have seen that a lot. That was one of the motivations for me was I'm getting tired of seeing groups develop and grow, have conflict, have a leadership change, and then the whole thing collapses. And so we see a lot of people or a lot of groups putting a lot of time and energy into developing a local secular group, and then it never grows or it dies or it has nonstop conflict between the members or the leadership because they don't know what their mission really is. What are we? Are we a social group or are we an activist group? And if you can't decide that, you're going to waste a lot of time and energy. And so I do see that. I'll just give you an example. There's a group in a medium-sized city, a couple 100,000, called me up to talk to me about leadership. This is quite a while back, and they were starting a new secular group in their city. And I listened to them, and I'm all supportive of them. I want them to succeed. But then I say, did you realize there's another secular group in your city, and it's been there for 15 years? And he says, no, I had no idea. Okay, you want to start a whole new group, but you don't even know if that group already exists in your city. And what I see is that these groups are not talking to each other, they're not communicating, they're not supporting each other, and they seem to like be in competition, which is inappropriate. Why do you need? We need all the secular groups we can get. We're not competing. It's not a limited number of people. It's an infinite number of opportunities, if you will. So yes, my long answer is that we have seen a lot of groups that aren't growing, that the leadership doesn't seem to be stable. There's a lot of conflict within the groups. The group can't decide its purpose is. Is it an activist group? Is it an atheist group? Is it a social club? What is it? And how do we define that mission and stay close to that mission?
Yeah, one of the problems I've experienced myself with one of the organizations I used to work with was that the way the organization itself was structured made it impossible for all the parts to work together. It was like they were completely separated from each other. And
Mm-hmm.
when you have so much separation within the same organization, it's like nobody knew what the other one was doing. And
Yeah.
it just, yeah, it was a big problem. Hopefully this program helps some of these organizations that are having these really big issues. So, speaking more about this specific program, you mentioned earlier that you have a background, that you've been working in organizational psychology, sort of leadership aspect of organizations. So,
Right.
how does that work? How does that help, or what is the purpose of that?
Well, secular organizations don't have to worry about supernatural ideas or bullshit ideas around authority. Once you've been trained, so many of our the people in the secular world, somewhere around 80% of all the people that are active that I come across in the secular world were raised religious. So they're coming out of religion into the secular world, and they're bringing some of that thought processes with them. And so what I want to address in the course is let's look at leadership as a secular function, independent or without the pollution of the religious leadership style. And that means really examining some of our looking at ourselves. How do we lead? Do I expect to be able to tell people what to do? Do I expect people to volunteer without any motivation to volunteer? And those are kind of for example, I call it the Sunday school effect, and that is somebody volunteers to do something, And like in church, if you volunteer to be the sixth grade Sunday school teacher, you have just volunteered for life. They never let you out. You've got to stay the Sunday, and that means that you are stuck, and you no longer want to do that. But you use they use guilt on you and shame. Well, who's going to teach it if you don't? And you're such a good teacher. We can't live with, they'll shame you and guilt you into staying in something you don't want to do anymore. So I challenge that as a way to treat volunteers. That actually is a terrible way to treat volunteers. And that's just one example of how secular leadership is polluted by religious ideas. Because we do the same thing. You volunteered to be the treasurer for our group. Well, now you're the treasurer for life. We're not letting you out of that. And if you do, we'll shame you and guilt you. Shame and guilt should have no place in the secular world. That's a religious idea. So I structured the course on two main levels. One is what we call the foundations course, and it's 4 sessions that are stretched out 2 weeks apart because we want to give people an opportunity to think about what they've learned in each session. Each session is 2 hours long, and it's interactive, and it's by Zoom. So we literally the cohort that just graduate had members from Australia and New Zealand, from Canada and the United States. Oh,
Oh
and
yeah. I actually pulled up a picture. If you don't mind, I'm gonna put it up on the screen
yeah,
for a second. There's the
sure,
group.
yeah,
There's all the very familiar faces. There's like two maybe that I don't know, but everybody else, yeah, some really
yeah.
cool
Uh,
graduates
there's
right there.
there's some faces that didn't show are not in there because they wanted to maintain their confidentiality,
Oh,
which
that's
is
fine.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's our first graduating class, and it's international: Australia, New Zealand, Canada, United States, United Kingdom, all in one class. And I'm thrilled about that because this leadership issue is not just it's not just local; it's international. I just got back in October. I did a speaking tour of England, of United Kingdom, and Ireland, and I talked to over the course of that 17 days. I gave 9 talks and to eight different local groups. Every single local group had the same complaint, and that is we can't attract young people. We can't get families to come.
I've already.
We uh, we haven't grown in the last 10 years. We've got about 50 people on our list, and only 20 ever show up. That's the kind of stuff I heard every single group. And two of those groups I had talked to way back in 2012 when I was doing my book tour for the secular for Sex and God. So I knew the two groups. And when I walked in there, I could tell they were the same groups. They were just 10 years older.
Oh,
So I know these groups are having difficulties and struggles, and you can't blame the group for poor leadership. And what I hear a lot of leaders saying is, I've got a terrible group because they won't do what I say. Well, that's not exactly leadership. It says more about you than it does about your group. And so what we do in the course is we explore ways to develop volunteers, develop commitment, develop ownership. Because in too many groups, it's the leader that owns the group, and not the leadership or the team of leaders that own the group. And so you've got a problem. It's called founder leader syndrome. And the person who starts the group never lets go of the group. A mark of good leadership when you can say, my group doesn't need me anymore, and I can step back. And that's what I'm doing with Recovering from Religion, with Secular Therapy Project. I am stepping back. I told all the board, I've told many of the volunteers, I've told Gail, I'm stepping back because I'm going to be doing this leadership stuff. You don't need me anymore. And
you got this. Yeah.
if I've done my job, then I've replicated myself. I've got other leaders out there that can do as good a job and probably better. I'm not the only leader, and I'm not necessarily the best leader. So I'm thrilled with the leadership that we now have at Recover from Religion and the Secular Therapy Project.
Yeah. I think the difference there is something that you pointed out is for religious institutions, they use authoritarianism. And for secular institutions or groups or programs, we need to use leadership, which is a very different thing from authoritarianism. Like authoritarianism is like, you do what I say or else. A leader
Mhm.
is someone that values, that puts their people, who they are leading, sort of in a very similar footing, and makes sure that they are succeeding as well, and not just
Right.
like, you do everything I'm saying or else you're gone.
Yeah. So what I focus on in my career, my focus was on team-based work systems. How do you develop teams and ownership in the sense that people emotionally own the work that they're doing? And that translates very nicely to nonprofit organizations in the secular world because the best nonprofits develop a team of leaders rather than one leader. You have a team of leaders, and then that team of leaders develops teams of other volunteers, and each team is responsible and owns a certain component of the organization. And if it really helps the communication problem that you mentioned earlier, people people have to help each other, listen to each other, communicate across teams, between teams, and within teams to achieve the goals that the organization has. And that's a very different mindset than what you see in any religious organization or any authoritarian. You're exactly right, authoritarian. But authoritarian leadership styles work. Obviously, they work. Re- Religions used it for 2,000 years or 3,000 years. I'm not saying they don't work. They don't work the way we want them to work. And they're not friendly. Authoritarian approaches are not friendly to the secular mindset that's pretty independent minded, pretty skeptical, asking questions, uncomfortable questions. So, and there's nothing wrong with that, except if you're in church. There's a lot of wrong there. So what we're doing is teaching how to lead an organization as a team leader rather than as a authoritarian leader.
Good.
Yeah, literally the session number one of the foundations course is looking at and understanding values and how we establish our values as a group, as an organization, and put those systems together outside of a religious or ideological approach, authoritarian approach. And then the second session, we spend 2 hours talking about mission, the vision, and more importantly, that second session, we talk about behavioral alignment. Because AJ, I see so many organizations that have this beautiful mission statement or vision statement. And then when you look at their behavior, it doesn't match.
It doesn't.
And so the disconnect is very discouraging to people. And it makes people cynical when they say, well, our vision statement says this, but our leader does that. So we spend a lot of time in the second session talking about how do you identify misalignment, excuse me, in your behavior from your vision and mission. And we talk about creating mission statements, and we talk about how to use a vision for the future and bring it into an entire group. You can't dictate the vision. You have to create the vision, and you have to have lots of people buying into that vision. And that's the first two sections. Then the third session is when we really start kicking butt. I mean, it's really when we get to the third session, we look at meetings. And my big bugaboo is that secularists are terrible at running meetings. Result, I'm just telling you the truth. By the way, church groups are too. That's not unique to secularists. But have you been in a meeting where it was supposed to go to 1 hour and it ended up 3 hours of argument?
I have.
I all of us have, and that's a terrible use of your volunteer time. Nobody in that room is getting paid to sit there and listen to people argue. So the third meeting we talk about the third session we talk about meetings. We talk about how to run meetings, how to be efficient in meetings, how to set agendas in meetings, how to behave in meetings, how to deal with conflict in meetings. There's just so much because in my mind, Meetings are the heartbeat of the entire organization. And if you don't know how to run a meeting, then you do not know how to run an organization either. It's that simple. Skill of running meetings. And I don't mean the leader running the meeting, I mean the team running the meeting. So in the third session, I give them a whole set of guidelines around how to run meetings. And if you just follow these guidelines, you will get 3 times as much work done in half the time. There's no need to waste our volunteers' time because you're disorganized or you don't know how to run a meeting. So anyway, that's the third session, and then the fourth session where we finish the whole course and kind of wrap it all up. We start talking about team leadership and how to delegate to volunteers. If I'm the boss of a company, a profit company, I have a certain amount of ability to say, AJ, you do this by next Tuesday and report back to me. Well, you really can't do that with volunteers. It doesn't quite work that way. How do you deal with volunteers? And how do you delegate to volunteers? How do you get them to volunteer? Because that's one of the big complaints I hear all the time is I can't get my volunteers to do anything. I have to do it all my. And so we read an article on who the article's name is Whose Monkey Is It? I won't go into details, but that's one of the articles I read. And we discuss it. We talk about, how do you delegate and get results out of volunteers? And that is one area that is definitely different from the corporate world. It's also definitely different from the religious world. So by the third and fourth session, we are really starting to hone down into the skills it takes to run a secular organization. And that's our foundation course. It's got 4 sessions. And then after you're finished with that foundations course, the real work begins, and that is to go out and start applying some of these. And to that end, we've got a course system where you can talk to other leaders. And my real goal in creating this whole institute, AJ, is I want leaders to go through this course together, start talking to each other, and then continue those relationships on into the future, sharing resources, identifying what problems each of you has, and taking future courses, of course. But the focus is let's develop a network of leaders who are reinforcing and supporting each other so that we don't have that problem that I mentioned earlier of a new leader in this city not even knowing the other group exists in the same city. That's nuts. Let's make sure we know who else is here to help us or how we can help them. How can we cooperate? As a direct result of that conversation that person and I had, since they went through the course, by the way, they're now totally cooperating with this other group, and they're attending each other's meetings, and they're creating new leadership structures. It's beautiful, but they only through the training did they get the skills, the ideas, the methodologies to now start doing that.
Yeah,
Uh,
to not reinvent the wheel, as they say.
exactly. Well, and to not reinvent a bad wheel.
Good point. Good point. So I love that there's so much focus on volunteers because I feel like volunteering for religious organizations is very different from volunteering for secular organizations in the sense that there are different motivations for it, right? Like people who volunteer for religious reasons generally do so because of the dogma and doing good for doing the Lord's work and all that stuff.
Right.
Whereas secular people need a different type of motivation, and that may be why some of them are not. They volunteer and they sign up, but they don't do the volunteering, as you were saying. That some organizations have that problem, and I've seen that myself with some of these organizations that I work with. But then I see other ones that I'm currently working with that I'm really pleased with the way they're running things. And the difference I noticed is that the first one, although it was a secular organization, they were still running things in a way that were more religious, just kind of like seeing volunteers as just another hand out there helping out. And the ones I'm currently working with, you can feel yourself being valued, despite the fact that you're not making any financial gain, because it's not, a job, it's a volunteer
Mhm.
position. You feel valued and you feel appreciated, and like you're needed, and like you're doing something with a purpose. So I think that's something very important to keep in mind.
Absolutely is. And in the second course, we call the intermediate course, we actually start looking at those kinds of ways to treat and motivate volunteers. And I use a term, a concept I think is just very useful, and that is the notion of the emotional paycheck. And what you just described was the first group, you did not feel an emotional paycheck. The second group, you feel an emotional paycheck and you feel you're growing from it. You're developing good relationship. You're accomplishing something. That's an enormous change from a religious group. And the more you feel the emotional paycheck, the more you want to do more for that organization. And we
Right.
spend a lot of time teaching the leaders, how do you help people develop their own emotional paycheck? Because nobody's going to get paid here. We're never going to have enough money to pay the people for what they're doing. So they have to have a different kind of paycheck. And I would submit that even in the corporate world, even in the profit world, people do better. They perform better at their jobs when they feel there's also an emotional paycheck. I could pay you $1 million to do a job you hate, and you would probably do a very good job at it. We have volunteers at Recovery from Religion, for example, that are putting in 10 and 20 hours per week doing stuff for our clients because they seem to get a superly good high paying paycheck, but it's an emotional paycheck when they answer the phone, help somebody through a crisis. And that's where we as leaders have to help people identify where they will get their emotional paycheck. And you'll get far more. You won't get 1 or 2 hours a week out of somebody. You'll get 5 hours or 10 hours because they feel good about doing what the organization's there to do. Now, there's a balance. We don't. You have to provide a structure there, and there is a structure. I'm not saying we're not a social service agency. We're not a babysitting agency. We're here to do something, but we also have to have a structure that rewards people for doing that. And that's a leaders have to create that.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that there's so there's people that may feel ready to go in and do this through your program, but there may be people that will like to be a leader at some point, but don't quite feel ready for the course that you're given. Is there any advice that you will give them on how to feel more prepared, or can anybody just at any stage of leadership join this program?
Yeah, we if you are a leader, current leader, obviously the course is built for you. If you're a board member of an organization, this course is built for you. So the two main people that really will benefit from this are current leaders and board members of organizations. The third group that really will benefit is people who want to become board members or they want to become leaders. Of course, the we're talking about leadership, but if you're on the board of an organization, you are automatically a leader. And
Right.
one of about especially in the seventh and eighth sessions, when we get to the second four sessions, that's called the intermediate course. We talk about behaviors that are appropriate for both leaders and board members. Because I see so many organizations, they have a board, but the board is dysfunctional. The board has conflict. The board is not on the same page. And people, the worst thing I see is people who are on the board and they never do anything. Why are they on the board if they're never doing anything? Or worse yet, they're on the board, but they never attend the board meetings. We need to be real clear about what we expect. And if you're on the board of religion, you are going to be working. We have a working board, and there's no excuse for not working. Now, that doesn't mean people don't take time off or don't step down off the board. We have normal turnover, and that's fine. I am quite happy though that many of the board members that do step down eventually, they still stay with us. They still volunteer. They just didn't want to volunteer at that level, and
Yeah.
that's we develop people in I see it as one of my roles and one of the roles of the leadership to develop the leadership skills of all the people in recovery from religion so that we could get candidates for new board members or new directors of departments. And once you've got that pipeline going, once you started developing leadership skills, then you've got a pipeline of future leaders coming through. And that's really what we're trying to do at the Institute. We're trying to say to the local group in Toledo, Ohio, or Sarasota, Florida, or wherever, you need a pipeline of future leaders. And they need to get trained now so that 2 years from now, they're ready to get on that board.
Yeah, yeah. And then you have the people who have already gone through the course and graduated, and they get some more experience. Then they're more able to recognize when, let's say, a new volunteer or a new member has those leadership skills that
Yeah.
they value, that are that they've learned are good ones, and they can be like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, why don't you go and do the program so that you can better learn all of these steps. So
I would encourage every organization to start looking at candidates that you might want on your board, or you might want to come in to direct one of your programs, and get them into these courses to get trained so they're even more prepared. We have had this put people in position and hope they do good approach for as long as I've been around. We have no one has ever trained, as far as I know. I've never seen an organization systematically training their leadership in the secular world. Now, if you
I
go
don't
on,
think so.
I would challenge anybody listening to this, go online and just type in church leadership and see how many courses there are. There's hundreds. And then type secular leadership and there will be one.
Here we are, which is good, because like you said, you're starting this program and you're training other leaders. And at some point, if you decide, hey, I want to step back from this one too, just like you step back from the other programs that you've developed, then you can do that, and we can continue this into the future. And I think if we set up secular organizations in a better way, like with better trained leaders, with stronger leaderships, it's going to make a huge difference in the future. Do you think the secular movement will make much more progress than it has in the past, I don't know, 20 years, in the next 10, with something like what you have right now?
Wow, you are touching on something I just told the group. And I said, my goal is to train 1,000 leaders in the next 10 years. So
Love it.
yes, here's here's what I know happens. And I know this from 35 years of experience in the corporate world. If I came into an organization, let's say which I did, let's just say 1995, I go in and I train a Blue Cross Blue Shield president or a vice president. If I train one person, that does almost no good at all. But if I bring that one person with their 5 team members and I train all of them at the same time in the same skills, the same language, the same techniques, it makes an enormous difference in 1 month or 1 year. You will see that the entire organization start transforming as they practice these very simple skills that are important in any kind of leadership. And that's what's going to happen here. If I train one leader out of the humanist organization of Manchester, England, that doesn't do as much good as if I train 3 leaders out of
Right.
the humanist Manchester, England. But once all 3 people have been trained, they'll come back into the organization knowing how to run meetings, knowing how to identify, deal with conflict, knowing how to develop a mission and a vision, and knowing how to hold each other accountable in a positive way so that everybody's getting a better emotional paycheck. So the goal is to get so many people trained, so many people using the same language, the same techniques. And it's not, I'm not trying to make clones out of everybody. We're not ants. We don't do all the same thing. But the tools that we're learning and we're teaching in this class are universal tools. You could use them at General Motors or you can use them in the Humanist Organization of Sarasota. It doesn't matter. How do you run a meeting is pretty much the same across the board. I'm not saying there are not differences, but the general pieces. How do you deal with conflict? Pretty much, if you got human beings, you can use the same techniques. So that's really my goal.
So are those the three main things that you're teaching? How to sort of like improve volunteer engagement within the organization,
Yep.
uh, running meetings, and conflict resolution. Are there any others that stand out?
Well, volunteer retention is a part of that. Yeah, definitely. In the second in the intermediate session, we go through how to how to create a learning organization. It's because so many organizations, when something goes wrong, they blame each other, they finger point. And so we're going to be talking about creating a learning organization because the best organizations are constantly learning. They're learning from each other, they're learning from other organizations. And to that end, every time we do a course, we have a special session. It's not mandated, but it's an optional session where we interview a successful secular organization. So a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we the whole class got on Zoom and we interviewed 4 board members from the Kansas City Oasis group.
Oh,
Kansas,
love it. Oasis is great.
it's one of the most successful secular organizations in the entire planet.
Yeah, we have one here in Houston. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've spoken at Houston 3 or 4 times over the years, and there, of course, that's where the Oasis started, was in Houston.
Oh,
There
okay,
was
I did not know that part. Okay, cool.
Houston was the first one, Kansas City was the second one. Now we're the best of the two, of course, but that's just because I'm a member of it. Bad joke. No, I helped start the Oasis here, but I don't take much credit because I only advised them early on and they went and did their thing. I still attend, I still donate regularly, but what I'm telling you is that we interview actual successful organizations and we ask them tough questions. And I send them the questions ahead of time and they come in ready to talk about it. And that way it marries theory with practice. And you can see that maybe Oasis isn't doing it exactly like Darrel thinks you should do it, but they're still successful. And I'm not there to say I'm teaching the only way to lead. I'm
Right.
getting you to think bigger picture about how do you lead, what kind of organization do we want here, and do we have the skills to achieve that. So
Yeah.
anyway, I could quickly just say that the other in session 6 we talked about technology, we talked about virtual teams and virtual leadership because technology has really changed the focus how you actually lead. It's there's some dangers in technology. For example, social media is a clear danger if you don't use it right. And then the seventh session, we talk about boards and money and how to engender trust within the board and the team. And we talk about board membership, how to find the best board members, how to support a strong board for an organization. And the last, we talk about how you multiply yourself as a leader, and how do you navigate conflict? How do you deal with values conflicts? There's a lot of things around growth. How do you grow an organization, and what's the board's role in that growth? So those are part of the intermediate course. It's the second set of 4, and those are two different courses. And you cannot take the second course if you haven't gone to at least 3 of the first courses, period.
Right.
We don't, you have to have the foundation before you can get the intermediate. And as we grow and get better at this, we're going to be adding an advanced, we'll call it an executive level training, but that will be pretty focused on specific types of leaders and
Gotcha.
not as broad. By definition, it'll be a much smaller group.
Love that. And how long is it currently, the whole process from sign up
Well,
to evaluation?
the first four are 2 weeks apart, so that's 8 weeks, and it's $300 for the 8 weeks. And then you have to finish 3 of those 4, and then you move to the second 4 sessions, 5 through 8. And again, that is $300, and those will complete the initial 8 sessions over a 16-week time period. If you miss a session, for example, someone misses session number 3 when they were going through it, they could come back and take session number 3 when it's next offered for nothing. Or extra for we want you to get all 4 sessions so that you understand the foundations. And I have 2 incredible helpers in this. Dr. Sharon McKean jumped in, and she's within a few weeks after I started this, she raised her hand and said, "I want to help on this." So I'm doing really well to get such a great person to help me out. If you go to the website secularleadership.org and look at that website, she designed the whole website and put
Love it.
all together. She's doing a great job. We'll be recruiting future people because I can't teach all these courses. I'm only one person. And so we'll be expanding this as we gain more experience. We're starting our 3rd class soon. We've graduated 1 class, as you showed there. We're starting the 2nd class. We're also starting the next intermediate class as well. That'll be the first time we've offered the intermediate class. So we're off to a strong start. We're going to have quite a few graduates here pretty soon. But
Yeah, that sounds like there's a lot going on.
Every course is limited to 10 people, no more than 10. We're trying to keep it and it's very interactive.
I like
Anyway,
that. Yeah, that's important to make sure that everybody's learning all the content, and that if you have questions or doubts and everything, if you have a class that is too big, is too messy.
And we give a little bit of homework, not a big amount, but a little bit of homework between each course. Usually just reading an article. Main thing is.
That's good.
Anyway,
It keeps the content fresh. It keeps what you learn sort of going up till the next meeting, up
yep.
till the next course, part of the course.
So I
Yep.
would encourage people to go to the website secularleadership.org, hit the button that says courses and calendar, and you can enroll. You can register right there for the next course. The next course is European friendly. We're doing it at 11 o'clock on Saturday, so that people in Europe can take the course.
Love that.
Most of the time we're going to be giving the course on a Tuesday night or a Thursday night. That's what the first 2 have been. But this Thursday, we had a lot of requests from the European side to do it to a more European friendly time zone. So we're doing that.
That's great. Did we miss anything else that we wanted to cover today?
Well, I would just encourage people to think about what leadership really means, why you want to be a leader, and how you can develop your own skills. If you don't take our course, fine, go find a course. Do so, because as leadership, we have not been very good at developing ourselves, and more importantly, we're not developing the pipeline of people. I want to have a good, strong bench of potential leaders in my organization, so that if my plane goes down, it doesn't hurt the whole organization. Or if somebody resigns, if somebody has a baby and can't be a volunteer in that anymore, you've got a succession plan with well-trained leaders, and we just don't do that in our movement right now. So yeah, that's my advice to everybody.
Love
That's
it. All right. Yeah. It was a great conversation. The course sounds amazing, and I hope that people will go to the website secularleadership.org and sign up and take it, because this is a really important thing in our community. If we want to build up the community, we need community leaders.
They can ask me, they can email me at Dr. D. Ray, D-R-D-R-A-Y, at secularleadership.org, or they can ask any of those people that are in that picture know what the course is about, so they can answer your questions too. Anyway, that's sorry
Perfect.
about that.
Sounds like a good plan. No, you're good. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Ray, for the opportunity to talk to you about this. We'll see everybody next time.